Hi and welcome back to Lethal. I'm Alistair, here today to talk to you about The Hobbit in 4K and why you should shell out for these amazing, beautifully restored films. Roll the thing! I enjoyed the films when they came out. Lord of the Rings for me is such a big part of my childhood, my teenage years, and then my adulthood, going from the animated the animated film to reading the books as a teenager with my now departed grandfather, and then into the movies, into my adulthood, and having all of these amazing characters and stories come to life on screen and done in such a faithful and loving and caring way was so important. So Lord of the Rings for me is probably my all-time favorite franchise of all time. Nothing will beat it. Nope. But we're going to get to that because I do have that too, and that is coming. Today we're going to talk about The Hobbit in 4K. Now, it is no secret that these films were incredibly disappointing. The first one was set to be directed by Guillermo del Toro, who's one of my favorite directors. He was still heavily involved, but stepped away at the last minute, and the Lord of the Rings director, Peter Jackson, stepped in at the last minute to save the day and finalize the film. Now, I don't want to go too much into what happened, because we know Peter Jackson decided to present the films in high frame rate, which made them look like a David Attenborough documentary on the BBC rather than incredible, immersive, beautiful fantasy films like we got with Lord of the Rings. So a big complaint for cinema goers was how it looked, and I agreed at the time. It looked weird, it was jarring, and I didn't really enjoy it how I probably should have enjoyed it. The good news is that the source material is so great. While The Hobbit is the smallest book, it's still got three 3.5 hour films, but it drew a lot of inspiration from Tolkien's other novels from the lore and brought that into the fold, and I did really enjoy the way that they did that and did it so faithfully. Here, The Hobbit, all three films have been lovingly restored in 4K. So what does this mean? This means that the high frame rate is out, but the beautiful 4K is in, which means that they've done a lot of work on these three films. Now, it's worth noting that it's both the theatrical edition and the extended editions on here. So let's open it up. This is where my disappointment comes in because they're presented like this. It's kind of a bit schlammy. So we've got our standard editions and our theatrical editions. Comes just in a case like that, and then we've got the cover, which is probably the best part. Now the good news is that the 4K, taking it back to 24 frames per second, putting it into, upscaling it to 4K does mean that it does feel like it's the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It has that same feel, especially when you watch Lord of the Rings in 4K, which we'll get to next week. What really works in this film is the sound. Now, I have a Dolby Atmos setup. Thanks to the pandemic, I got a beautiful new home theater to do my work. So if you have a Dolby Atmos surround sound system, or even just a soundbar or general surround sound system, turn it up, close your doors, because it is going to blow you away. The Dolby Atmos mix upgrade is beautiful, and you definitely don't want to skimp on this, so make sure that you're not going to be interrupted. You put your phone down because it's just that good. In relation to the visuals, I really found that I really connected with the source material this time around. So when I first saw it, particularly in An Unexpected Journey, it felt very theatre-esque. And that's okay because the film's meant to feel like that, but it shouldn't look like that. And because of the 4K restoration and the slowing down of the frame rate, it does look much, much, much better, and I found it more enjoyable for the first two films. However, the third film definitely still is a difficult one to watch. The Battle of the Five Armies is exactly what it says. It's a 3.5 hour battle. And I think after about an hour and a half, it just goes on for way too long. And while, yes, there are different things going on, it just didn't work for me, the third film. It still doesn't work this time around. It just looks and sounds better in it. When you get to the second film and you get introduced to Smaug, he looks incredible in 4K. That whole sequence of, you know, trying to get him out of the mine and get the Arkenstone back is such a great thing to watch in 4K. It looks absolutely stunning. I can't even convey how beautiful it looks, and I will definitely be watching the first two films on a yearly basis in this beautiful 4K Ultra HD presentation. Look, I'm a massive fan of Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I do feel like this is the version we've been waiting for. I would love a version where they kind of condense the extra stuff that we don't need into maybe 2 films rather than 3, because I don't think we need the third film at all. Of course we need to finish things off, but you know, we can always combine things together and make it work. In relation to the discs themselves, they purely just carry the film. So there's no extras, there's no commentary, there's none of that. I don't know if you recall, but there's a lot of like making of features in the original things. There's none of that here. It's just purely the films. Now there is set to be a Ultimate Edition coming out next year, which will have The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings in 4K, and that's set to have all the bonus features on there. So if that's what you're after, maybe hold out for that. But it is a year away, so I would definitely pick this up if you can. If you're a fan of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, this comes highly, highly recommended. Finally, in a way that we're meant to see it and can enjoy it, crank that soundbar up and enjoy The Hobbit in 4K. I'm Alistair, this is Lethal, and I'll see you next week for a review of Lord of the Rings 4K.